Hi, I'm here today to talk about I Am Malala, the girl who stood up for education and was shot by the Taliban by Malala Yousafzai with Christina Lamb. I assume everyone has heard about Malala. This book is very popular. She's the youngest winner of the Nobel Prize for all that she's done for girls' education. She originally hails from Pakistan, but now lives in Britain, and this is her autobiography. Sorry, my dog is here again. She is very, well, English is her third language, and she wrote this when she was 16 or 17, I believe. So, it's a very, this isn't this sort of stunning great work of literary fiction. It's nonfiction, it's autobiographical, and it has a very matter-of-fact, almost journalistic sense of, the events that happened to her. Andy, don't eat that. You're not going to eat. No. You're not going to eat that. Let go. Let go. No. Okay. Good girl. Say hi. Say hi to the internet, Andy. Isn't she adorable? Adopt dogs. They need it. Oh, she's just a baby. All right. Now that I'm done pandering to the audience, so about the first 100 pages is about her father's life and the political events that happened up through before her birth and through her early life that were that caused so much turmoil in Pakistan. There were military coups, there was religious extremism, and from what I've read on Goodreads, this was the part that most people don't like. They more wanted to focus on Malala and her life story. I actually did enjoy it because I didn't know very much about Pakistan going into this, and getting an insider perspective was very illuminating. And I think also, too, it's important to understand where all of this, where the support for the Taliban came from, what people were looking for, those kind of things. No, we are not going to eat that either. No, let go. Sorry. So it's very, she does have a very matter-of-fact way of speaking, and I think some people were disappointed in that. They wanted a more emotional, kind of style, but she'll be describing these heinous events, but in a very matter-of-fact, almost dry way. For example, she would talk about how after the Taliban had instituted their regime and had started telling girls not to go to school anymore, she was walking to school one day when she was in middle school, or what we would call middle school, and she heard someone say behind her, a man, "I'm going to kill you." And she was so scared, she turned around, and the man was talking on the phone, and she felt enormous relief because he wasn't talking to her, so she hurried off and rushed to school. So things like that, or walking past rows of beheaded heads on her way to school. But she writes that very matter-of-factly, and it's something, I mean, I've never even had to walk past one decapitated head in all my years of schooling, and I'd probably explode with an emotional soliloquy if that happened. So she's very resilient. And this book really covers the, I have my list here. This book really covers the, kind of the nuance of the region quite well, I'd say, because Malala and her family are very devout Muslims, but at the same time they are completely opposed towards the Taliban and their fundamentalism and their style of Islam. And Pakistan is a very interesting region because it's influenced by the Middle East, but isn't technically part of the Middle East, and it's kind of a part of Asia, but not completely, and it does share a complex history with India, but it's very, but one that's very violent and full of, and also the British are very well tangled up in that, and it's something that, I mean, most Indians are Hindu and most Pakistanis are Muslim, and so it's led to a lot of antagonism. And And again, so there is a level of nuance, and there is a level of like in between-ism that kind of reflects in this novel. And so we really get sort of a portal into a citizen's life, and she just wants to go to school, and that's all she does. And although she was involved in activism part of this, like she kept an anonymous journal for the BBC, but she's just trying to live her life, and that was so radical. So she gets shot in the head, and that's what causes her family. She leaves for Britain for medical treatment and rehabilitation, and she has been back since then. So it's it's very touching, and it's not very final. Like, there's no resolution. Obviously, this is based off of a real life event. But one thing that I found particularly very intriguing was the rhetoric of the religious extremists, the Taliban, and also the Islamic fundamentalists. I grew up in a very Christian fundamentalist culture, which at first would seem quite different because both Christians and Muslims, both fundamentalists are very antagonistic towards each other, but I recognized a lot of the same logic and rhetoric used. And so her father ran a girls' school, was teaching girls and ran a school. And so people would come tell him, both with threats or otherwise, to stop teaching girls. And so a local mullah had come and was telling him to stop teaching girls. And this is on page 94 of my edition. And my father seemed worried and shooed us into the other room, but the house was small, so we could hear every word. I am representing the ulema and the Taliban and the Taliban, Mullah Ghulam Mullah said, referring not to just one but two organizations of Muslim scholars to give himself gravitas. I am representing good Muslims, and we all think your girls' school is haram and a blasphemy. You should close it. Girls should not be going to school, he continued. A girl is so sacred she should be in purdah, and so private that there is no lady's name in the Quran, as God doesn't want her to be named. And when I read that, like, obviously there's this girl who has had an incredibly different lifestyle than I've had. I recognized that same logic because that was the same thing that I had heard growing up. Like, I was, allowed to go to school, but that was something that I've heard a lot in Christian fundamentalism, which is that women are so sacred, that's why they shouldn't be allowed to work or be in the military. Or women are so sacred, they shouldn't be tainted by politics, or they shouldn't. And it's a way of placing a group of people so high up on a pedestal that even though they're oppressing them, they adorn it with such flowery language that, Andy, sorry, dog needs attention. They adorn it with such flowery language to make it seem like it's actually complimentary or like it's actually a privilege. And I thought that was so intriguing, that fundamentalism, and I can't speak for other like religious traditions or anything, but that it's so similar, that it had such a similar vein of logic, thousands and thousands of miles away with completely different people groups, completely different situations. So I would recommend this book for people who are not only interested in Malala's story, but who are also interested in politics of the Pakistan region, who are interested in a bit in the history, who are interested in revolutionaries or activism, and also for people too who are interested in sort of life under a regime and the life of ordinary citizens and their response to the Taliban occupation. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars, and I was so blown away by it. So I highly recommend that anyone pick it up. So, doei!